Cool.
And then, you can follow James and I, hashtag James, me. Damn it.
I don't know that one.
That is a really long hashtag.
All right, today was the most truest of form interview because we'll call it Southern Fried Post. We're doing it in the morning, and we had biscuits and gravy this morning. We are true Southerners.
And we made it without having to use the restroom.
It's a feat for us. So we talked to Jason Winn. We're going to talk to Jason Winn. Longtime friend. I mean, we've done so many shorts, features, whatever with him and post
stuff.
He produced our first movie. Good friend. I mean, we're going to have to cut down on it because we end up talking so much.
Yeah, and he brings a perspective that's really neat too, because he was years of directing for him and a bunch of different roles. But now, while he's still directing, he's producing a lot. He comes with not only just post-production knowledge, but he comes with a lot of pre-production and a lot of production knowledge that is invaluable.
Because he's been doing it for so long. I mean, he's got experience.
So, for anybody that's either new in the industry or has been in the industry for a while, he has a lot to say that gives insight into best handle not only the production process, but also kind of the mentality behind it and how to keep a positive mindset behind it and why it's so important to support your crew, your post-production crew.
That's what I love about Jason. Like the ego is just left at the door. I mean, there almost is no ego. I mean, like he knows what he's doing and you can talk to him and understand that, but it's not like, we're going to do this because I know what I'm doing. It's, we're going to do this to drive the story and to tell the best story we can. And I think that's the most key valuable factor that any filmmaker can have. It's all about story. We say that all the time.
Yeah.
And Jason really understands that. So we talk about post-production. We talk about his movies he's working on now, movies he just did.
And we get into one of the things is Jason he has a lot of quick turnarounds. Being a lot of stuff he's producing and has made in the past has been either low budget indie or low budget studio work. And we start off talking actually about one of his movies he directed a little while back, and they had five days.
During COVID, they had 5 days to shoot.
5 days to shoot this movie, and the post turnaround. And
I was there
very quick
as the second unit director. It was crazy.
Yeah. So
it was a lot.
We're going to dive in with Jason. We're going to start off this conversation of why do something so crazy. So, Jason, one of the projects we got to work on you with was a project called Rift, and it was one of the wildest projects we've ever been a part of, probably you too, because y'all filmed the sucker in 5 days. Is that correct?
5 days in one pickup.
And we're not talking just like project. Like this is like full feature film.
Full feature film, and it was during COVID.
Yes.
Not like, it was like height of COVID.
Yeah.
Not like, we're kind of coming off of it. Like there's not a vaccine yet.
Right. Like you could die.
Well, the good thing though,
lots of people were dying.
Not on the set though.
Yeah.
The good thing about this is you shot it in 5 days, so we only had to test like twice, right?
Right. So what ended up happening with that project is I was contacted by some producers and said, they wanted me to direct the film, wanted it to be a work for hire project. And then, I kind of helped them put it together. And, I brought in my DP, James Suttles, who's my business partner now. And he and I kind of tackled it the way we always do, which is reverse engineer it. And the thing that kind of sold me on the project to begin with is that the producers had found the location. And so they had built the script around a single location where it was a layered location. So it was like a 3-story building where we could use different sets inside the building and around the adjacent area to maximize productivity. And it was downtown during COVID, so it wasn't crazy busy. So we were able to kind of steal some shots around the building, and it gave it the texture and kind of the grittiness and the feel that we wanted to do. What ended up with that project, it was, your page count at that point is around, 7 to 10 pages a day. if you're
if
flying
not more. I think there were a couple days where we did 12 or something.
Yeah, but I also was running 3 units, and so that was the big thing on that project. It was getting a really solid plan on paper with shot listing and top downs, and then it was finding the right team members to do second unit directing that I could just trust, like you. Like I said, okay, I want these action car sequences to happen. Here's what I think would be cool. Go out and shoot it. And when you're moving that fast, you really don't have time to micromanage it, and so you trust the team. So we had that unit going. We had another B-roll unit going that was just kind of picking up footage. And then I was primarily working with the actors and the narrative structure of the story. And we would kind of check in and see, where we were. We shot 2 cameras and we shot on zoom lenses. And James and I designed that so that we could move fast. And it also to give it a look. So rather than, because I burped. Rather than fight the challenges and try to square peg, round hole it, we kind of said, well, let's lean into it. And so if we're looking for this kind of frenetic energy with the project, zoom lenses is a great choice. And that's the thing I think that's important for young filmmakers to think about is, we do fall in love with this new technology, but at the end of the day, it's about telling stories and creating emotion and feeling. And it's just a tool. The camera is just a tool. Lights are just tools. And so it's like how you use those tools to convey what you're trying to convey is what's important. So, we had a couple of big set pieces and we got lucky. And I think a lot of the reason it was in 5 days +1 was the testing, because the testing had just come out and it was so expensive. And so it was like, a big chunk of the budget.
Do you think it could be done again now? Just 5 days.
Do you think I could do it, or
Yeah.
do you think anybody?
Yeah,
could do it?
post-COVID. I mean, obviously not everyone could do it because that's insanely difficult. But
Right.
yeah, you or another gifted, smart person. Do you think it could be done again?
I do. I think the way the industry itself is trending is because of all the new platforms that are out. The need for content is so vast. And it's a business. And I think that's the thing it circles back to. And I think you've got a finite amount of money, whether it's $5,000 or $5 million, to create what it is you're trying to create. And so it's backing that into the business plan with the contingencies for overages to try to stay on time and on budget. I don't think very few filmmakers will get the luxury of what Coppola's doing with Megalopolis, and he's funding it. And so it's like he could shoot for 14 days, take 7 days off, and then, go back to it because he's controlling the money. But when it comes to professional filmmaking, it's all about the schedule and the budget. So I think you have to really reverse engineer a story like that to make it work. I think you could do a Saw type story, like a horror film. I think you could do a fairly contained project. But the thing that was different about Rift is it wasn't that contained. It didn't feel that contained. And so it was a big movie. It wasn't the Cabin in the Woods picture. I mean, it's a story about a woman who gets kidnapped. And then, David and I went out to this abandoned warehouse on the side of the freeway and shot some B-roll GoPro footage to try and cut together when we were editing, because we realized we needed that.
That was a cool sequence because it was like, how is this going to cut? And then you do it and it's like, oh, it's just, body cam footage, and it's tense. It's cool.
Right. So I think it's understanding the technology. I think it's working the plan. James and I have made a bunch of movies together, and we knew how to work fast, and we knew not to overcomplicate it. And it's like you get what you need and then you move on. And that's kind of been our mantra for everything. But we're all about putting it on paper and making it a plan. And so when you and I sat down, we had a plan.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. You mentioned this and a couple other people talking about indie films. It's it all comes down to location. Yeah. I totally forgot that, and I was there, that, it was 3 different levels as multiple locations. And
right.
It's brilliant when you're shooting a 5-day.
Mm-hmm. You can't tell it when you watch the movie. It looks like you've gone to multiple locations. It looks very natural for everything. It doesn't feel like, sometimes you'll watch a movie and you're like, this feels very forced. You're trying to make me believe it. But that one is when you just said that, it really did. I was a reminder. I was like, oh, this was one location. This was
both
not
restaurants are one thing.
Yeah.
The basement that they're walking through is one.
Yeah,
the same.
Actually, it's 4 stories, and then we went to one other building, and that was the police station. So we had 2 physical locations that stood for like 8 locations.
And then even when cars are going by, that's down the street from that building. There's a parking lot scene that's across the street from that building. So
and I think you hit on something else that's really important too. Is you also hit on the point of it's not the technology, it's not all the things you can have. It's a well written story,
right?
And gathering the footage you need. Because I mean, we work with young filmmakers all the time. Where it's like, well, we went out and we spent all of our budget on a Red, or everybody's always after an Alexa, right?
Right.
And they're after these lenses that are thousands of dollars to go rent, stuff like that. And at the end of the day, they come back, they're like, well, we ran out of money and we don't have the story we wanted. And it's like, you didn't focus on the main thing, the story.
Right.
But what makes Rift interesting is 5 days. Like you said, you had 3 units, which means the structure of how everything was put together and the scheduling was direly important, because the littlest mess up can throw you off for a day, right? Yeah. And so you were talking about a huge feat. You get all this together, and then I remember we got into post, it was kind of like there were points where it was just like, okay, we have all this, and this, and so it was kind of Walker's job as an editor to be like, now put it all together, and like follow the script to make it make sense, which wasn't hard. It was all shot well and everything, but it's just, it was...
Well, 2 cameras running at the same time, it's a lot of footage to go through. You guys didn't have a ton of time to do multiple takes, but there was still a decent amount of takes and a decent amount of stuff to roll through. Find looks and find...
it's funny because you talk about the lenses, and yes, you do hear all that. I mean, I've made a bunch of movies that have shown all over the world on those Rokinon DS lenses, and they look great. We use filtration on them. We do like a quarter pro mist, and, we ND it and we give it that look. We shot Rift on the Sigma Cines zooms. And all the movies that we do now currently are on the Sigma zooms. We're a big fan of Sigma. Mm-hmm. We think they've got a really great look. And if you use filtration, you can give it the look that you want. I think it's just understanding the tools that you're working with and not falling in love with the tool itself, because not everything needs, an engine. We did a short and we used the Cooks, and they were fine. They look great, but I mean, it warranted what we were trying to do to give it a softer feel, but
you could have done it.
I could have done it.
Been just as happy.
Just as happy. I
guess
that's what
and we're also getting to an interesting role, and I hate saying like do it in post because that makes a lot of people mad. Right. It makes us mad sometimes, but there is also the thing of some of the stuff that these characteristics of these lenses had sometimes was color, how they interpret
right.
color,
it was the aberration,
like and
all the little subtleties.
And like sometimes like now we're and like I was showing him there's software now where we can even in post. It's a software called Scatter that does an amazing job of like pro mist filters and stuff, but doing it in post, it knows how to read the light and how it would properly diffuse. So like, let's say like you put a pro mist on there, and you're like, oh, that was too heavy, and that can happen. And then you just burned a day and you might not have the budget to go back. You just got to live with it.
You got to live with it. Yeah.
So now it's like, there's possibilities in post, stuff like that. And I think you're right. The Sigma lenses look great. Like, I'm sorry, but they've done so many tests with high end, like the largest DPs with like comparisons of even like the Canon 50 millimeter versus some of these other Cooks, stuff like that. And a lot of the times on the same camera, they can't tell the difference.
One can make an argument, but it's for, if you're looking at
story comes first.
The story comes first. And it's like, ultimately, I spent my whole life as a director in commercial and corporate video and all this, but ultimately I just wanted to do movies. And when I turned 40, I decided that I was going to get gear.
Yeah.
And like what?
And that was last year.
Yeah, that was last year. No, and that allowed me to be like, okay, well, now I don't have to chase money. I can just go make what I want, and then that kind of afforded it. So the same argument could be made that if you're a high schooler and you want to tell a movie, you could use your iPhone and you could edit it together. It's all about telling a good story.
You see kids now, I mean, like that have gone off and made stuff with lower end cameras, iPhone, stuff like that, but they come up with interesting concepts that haven't been created, and someone sees it and they're like, let's give you a shot here, because how you've even done this, I mean, the lo-fi stuff, people are digging it right now.
They're digging it, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, you don't need the best camera ever. I mean, people are, like think it was Skinamarink that just came out, has a very like lo-fi kind of look and
You
everything.
shot that for like $15,000 or something.
Yeah. And I mean, like, but it has a cool look to it. And it's a different look. And it was just, everything's different about it. So, I mean, it's just, I think I love some of the bigger cameras and the bigger lenses. Like some of these anamorphics, yeah, they're beautiful. And the anamorphic does have a different look from spherical. So like, of course, 100%, like I'm never going to try and make that case. And you can try and replicate in post, but I wouldn't dare.
Right. There's an organicness to the way it bends the light and the way that the subject is laid out through the glass. Like there's definitely a look, but if you're talking about low budget, I don't think that's the end all be all. I think you lead with story and content and emotion. Like, but to go back to what you were talking about with Rift, you know, I want to say the script was only about 60 pages. And so what I ended up having to do was row the scenes, which is kind of a term that Walker and I came up with, which was like, I'm on set, like, you know, those acting exercises that now the actors are like improvising. It's like, okay, well, here's the 2 pages, but I need this scene to be 4 pages or 6 pages. You guys got to keep going. And so we were on set, you know, coming up with ideas, and then they would row the scenes, and then we would kind of pick and choose what made sense in post, and that happened on Dead Thirsty too, because the script wasn't very long. And the movie came in like right at 80 minutes. Like it was just right there in that cusp, because, you know, we had to extend some things. So
I saw a tweet the other day that said, can we please normalize 80-minute long movies? And I was like, yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. I mean, because there's a fine line, I think, between too much and not enough. Because we've all seen too much, and then the not enough kind of gets passed over. So there is definitely a sweet spot of attention span. You've told me just enough of the story for me to care, and now I'm ready to get out.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons we keep on seeing longer movies is now we have episodic television where every episode is like an hour long.
Right.
So now everybody's like, well, I want to know more about this world. And it's like, well, just enjoy the ride. Can't we just enjoy the ride for an hour and a half?
Right.
You know?
I saw last night, this is super nerdy. I saw last night, you know, the video game Elder Scrolls, you know, like Skyrim, like the third one or whatever it was called, Morrowind. And I saw last night, there was a video that came out maybe a year ago, 7 hours long, deep diving into the game and discussing it. I'm like, you know, that's too long.
Yeah.
Who's going to watch that?
That's a perfect example.
But it's like, you have this platform where you could make a thing for 10 hours, I guess, if you're...
Well, and if, you know, 1 or 2 people around the world find that interesting, then you're good.
True.
So, you know, we get through 5 days of post, or 5 days of production on Rift. We go into post. You know, one of the things, we've worked with you on quite a bit of films, but what is your approach as not only director but also producer moving into post for something like Rift? What is your approach to that? Do you leave it kind of leaving more trust the post team, or do you think it's better to be more hands-on?
All I can do is speak for myself, and the way that I look at filmmaking in general is it's one of the most collaborative art form out there. And so I feel like if I've done my job, then you work with the artist that you trust. And so that's that part of the art. And so for the films, like I'll look at dailies and stuff on bigger movies, but for like Rift, it was just quick. And so Walker had cut a version of it. And then when I came in, that's when we started messing with it. But I usually like the editor to get a good first pass before I even see it, because I want to see if it makes sense. Because whenever I step into the edit suite, I'm taking in the days with me. And I'm taking in all the prejudices from, you know, late actors to, you know, irritated, whatever, like all the emotions of the production go into the edit. And so I think it's really important to divorce myself from that as much as possible, to just see it from an audience perspective and not bring on those kind of feelings, like a performance issues, or like, man, I didn't quite get what I want. Like, rather than get hung up on the minutia of it, it's kind of, you have to stay in a big picture.
I think it's interesting. I remember one time Walker was talking with someone about a project, and they actually never wanted Walker to be on set.
Right.
It was important. And one of the reasons was they were said, as an editor, we don't want you to see how much time we took on this shot, because if you feel some kind of prejudice, like, well, they spent so long on this particular shot,
I got to make it work.
I got to make that shot work.
I have a problem with that, though. I get that argument, but I'm also like, but as an editor, you should be able to separate that. Like, I think personally, I think it's important to have an editor on set. Because how many times have I cut something where I'm like, why do they not get this shot? They need this shot. Well, it's obvious. If I was there, I could have told them.
Well, we work together with our post team now, the way that we're making our movies. I mean, we're checking the dailies. You know, when we're working as editors, you know, we say, hey, is it covered? Do we feel like we've got everything? Or we're here at this location, like, today, now's the time if we're going to go get this pickup. And yeah, it's extremely invaluable. I think sometimes on indie films, though, you don't have that luxury because you don't have that time or that money. Yeah. But I think, you know, it's very important to make sure that you've got the right pieces, because when you're in the edit suite, that's it. It's all you got. So I always say, have the big idea, have the oneer, but shoot a cutaway or two just in case, because it might not work for pacing. As brilliant as you think you are as a filmmaker, and it took me a long time to realize that, because I'd try these oneers and these really interesting things.
You didn't tell me that.
Yeah. Well, I trusted you.
Thankfully, it worked out.
But it did. That's the best oneer I've ever seen executed on an indie film, period. But it was
don't say these things, Jason. Well, Look at this man.
But it was also
there like a crown?
It was also 14 takes.
Yeah, that was a lot.
And we had to fight for the last one. Yeah. So it's like
we're talking about By Nights In streaming now.
Yeah, By Nights In streaming now on Hulu. Is it on
I
Hulu?
Wish.
No, Amazon.
Yeah, somewhere.
Tubi.
I don't know.
We lost.
By Nights In. But yeah, anyways, it's a great film, but it's like I've tried a couple of those things and it worked on paper, and then when you go to do it, it's like, well, somebody put a door in the way of the Steadicam. I actually physically can't get over to the shot. And rather than, and I've made the mistake where I committed. I was like, well, I want it. This is what we want to do. And we get in post and I was like, wow, it really does need coverage. That was a bad idea because I wasn't willing to bend, even though the ergonomics of the set forced me to. I held to my guns when I should have just been like, you know what? Let's do it this way. And then let's just flip a lens real quick, get her coverage. And if we need it, great. If we don't need it, that's fine.
Tim and I were talking about that the other day. Tim, local, Tim Burr.
Yeah.
AD, whatever, does everything, producer. Big Pond Pictures, shout out.
Yeah.
We did a short for him 2-3 years ago. And he had a oneer, and his idea was this oneer going through a party. And I got to it, and I was like, this is slow. So I chopped it up, and then it turned into this kind of jumpy. I don't remember what the decision was or why we did it, but I'm pretty sure it was just pacing. But we kind of jumped through the party, and then we'd cut over here into the one, and then we'd cut. Then we'd cut to the beginning of the one, and it felt like different shots. And we were talking about it the other day. He was like, "That was the right call. I shouldn't have done that one." I was like, "But that was the one time where it was like, hey, this actually works to use the oneer, but chop it up and." All that to say, it's super interesting how, and that's one thing I love about editing is the puzzle piecing and the discussion about it and trying to tell the story correctly.
Right. And sometimes the way the story's written isn't the correct way to tell the story. Not to deviate so far from the script that it looks like a completely different picture, but just understanding in the moment to get those puzzle pieces. Sometimes it works in its singularity, but as a whole, it becomes problematic either through pacing or things like that. And you don't know that until you see it.
Well, that happened on your last movie, right? I mean, we shuffled scenes a bunch and it still worked. It wasn't like we screwed up the story. It was just, hey, what if we move this scene over here and move this scene here? And, oh, yeah, it's still, we went back and forth on that a few times.
Yeah, just trying to get it right. Just trying to find the subtleties of it.
Which is interesting because it kind of takes us into low budget studio, right? The last picture you did. So you go from Rift being low budget indie to low budget studio. I mean, is there a major difference there you experience, or as a director?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, yes, 100%. I think from a directing standpoint, I think the goal should be to make the best movie you can with the resources that you're provided. I think oftentimes directors come into indie studio movies with big visions and big dreams, and those are great to have. But back to the budget conversation, money is finite, and so it has to be allocated in certain ways. And I think to be a working independent director or streaming director, I think you have to work within that sandbox that's given to you, whether it's $5,000, whether it's $500,000, whether it's $100,000, and try to figure out what tools are the best to use to tell those stories. I think the one that we just did was really interesting because it primarily takes place online. It's a different kind of movie than I've ever made.
It's a lot of screens.
It's a lot of screens. It's a lot of technology. It's a thriller, and it was a lot of fun to do. But it was hard. It was hard because it was like a constant math equation of like trying to make sense of these different beats.
This stuff happens on the screen, but obviously we're going to add that later.
Right.
Do we have the shots to cover that?
Right. And so like this,
are we going to have to recycle these shots again? Do we have enough to like make sure just in case?
Right. And we wanted to keep it cinematic. So we wanted to keep the camera moving.
Yeah, the movement's awesome in it.
And so it has a feel, I wanted to try and design something that felt fun and energetic, and you really kind of get sucked into the story. And so
when you're doing something like that, where you're going to have a lot of this taking place on screen, y'all have the story, and being in a low budget studio, like sometimes you don't have much time to even prep.
Right.
So it could be a couple. So how do you work with that team that's going to be taking on that afterwards to make sure that what your idea of like how you're putting together, do you get a chance to work with
your post VFX? Because low budget indie, like it's not passion. I mean, everyone's still getting paid, but there's still more of that like, hey guys, can we come together just for a little bit? Where studio, it's more like bam, 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 get it done, do this.
Right. So when y'all were planning that, did y'all have a chance to talk with whoever's going to be doing VFX or someone who does VFX to plan for what y'all wanted to do?
We did. So James and I's idea was to get Coen Brothers at James, my producing partner. And he also was the DP. So James and I are business partners now. We make movies together. And so we came together and kind of decided what these elements were going to look like. And he built the website, and he did a lot of that kind of stuff. And then we hired an graphic artist to create elements. And then we actually went ahead and hired a VFX company to create some on-screen elements. And we still ended up with 187 VFX shots in the film, even though we had like it felt to me, I was like, wow, this feels like we're not going to have that many VFX shots because we had a lot of practical that allowed us to move the camera. She's scrolling through websites and all that stuff.
But then you get into the store and you go, oh, hang on, we need to add X, Y, and Z to the website she's scrolling through.
And we're actually doing that right now. We're in post on it. And so I've been working with the VFX team and the art team again to repurpose the same assets and to make sure that they're being presented in a way, because it's a big part of the narrative. So the big part of the storytelling is the characters, but also the world in which they're living in, because there are these dualities of personality between like the real world and the online world. And that's kind of what the whole movie's about. And so it's been interesting. And again, I think that's one of the most challenging things, is to really take a deep dive into that and go, okay, well, what does this look like? What does it mean? Like this is representative of obviously real things, but we can't get clearance on those. And so you're kind of mimicking these social media online sites that we interact with on a daily basis and almost now take for granted. I would say we take it for granted at this point. Yeah. It's just like, it's just part of the world. Like, you're talking about attention span. If I'm going to really watch a movie, I have to take my phone and put it in the other room. Because I'll ultimately find myself looking at Instagram or Facebook for no reason. Like, why do I care?
I'm not gonna lie, that drives me absolutely nuts when people do that, and you just
Maddie will do it. Maddie, my wife, we're watching Arrested Development right now because she's never seen it. Every now and then she'll just like, she's an IMDb person too. Like, wait, who is that? And she gets on IMDb and starts scrolling.
But you're disconnected.
And then she's missing 10 minutes of Mando. We're also watching that, and I'm just like looking over, like, hey, this thing's about to happen that you need to see.
I think that's interesting. I think something also to bring point to y'all as a producing team, which really made that work, is James. So not only is a DP for years, successful DP.
That's how we met.
Yeah, but also he has a big foot in the post world.
Yes.
And so, like you said, y'all were able to have a conversation with VFX artist, and he was able to pre-build this stuff.
Right.
Now, granted, still not much time. Y'all are moving quick.
Yeah, from the time that we got the job, I think it was like 2 weeks, and we were in production.
Yeah, it's not much time at all.
Not much time at all, and that's how we like doing them. But it's like he and I have been talking about like the biggest challenge in the film and the biggest concerns that I had as a director wasn't the actors and wasn't the blocking and all that. That's fine. Those are like just another day at the office. It's all this. It's all these little things that are coming up now that we're trying to get ahead of. And we got ahead of so much of it that, you know, it helped, but we still had 187 VFX shots. And if you don't have any money, I mean, now that could put you behind years. You know, and so like we're fortunate that it is kind of a lower budget studio movie, and so we have the money to pay to get it done in a timely manner. But I think it goes back to the same kind of thought process in filmmaking in general, which is, you know, you've got a lot of passion as a young filmmaker to like grab a camera and go out and do it. And I think as you become more seasoned, you realize that it's a lot of it's on paper, and it's on paper. Not to just paint by numbers of what your original ideas were, but to keep you on track when things get chaotic. And you've always got like a roadmap. Like you wouldn't just, you know, set sail blindly. And so I think it's important to kind of go back to that. So we were constantly checking stuff like that. And on the days, man, we would call Chandler and be like, yo, we messed up. You got to create, like, so we had like a graphic designer on call. Like we were doing graphics and they were coming in as we were doing them and setting them because we were in it and we were realizing, oh, we don't have this and we don't do this. And like, it's cheaper for us to try and get it on screen now than to do it in VFX. And we still end up having a ton of shots.
So I think if I'm correct in this, from March of 2022 to December of 2022, y'all's company produced 6 films. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
Actually, the last one was a few weeks ago, so January.
So, okay, yeah, all right. So that's a quick turnaround on a lot of these films. With y'all being producers, what does it look like? So you're able to, your pre-production is not very long. Mm. Your production is, you know, you get probably 2 to 3 weeks, I'm guessing, for these films. Then you get into post. What does that look like for y'all as producers? And how do y'all make sure everything gets to post properly? I mean, because there's a lot of pieces juggling here. And so going into post, like, what does that situation in a smaller budget studio world look like for you?
Work with people you trust, which is why we work with you guys. I think it's a situation where everybody's got to be on the same page. And, you know, the fun thing for us, I mean, we've done it all. I mean, he's been a very successful DP, successful director, successful producer, editor, post supervisor, and all that. And myself, I've done those things as well. And so it's kind of, we understand all aspects of film production and what it takes to really do it. And so I think it's creating an environment to keep a clear line of communication and make sure that all the little details are being handled. And then create a situation where the directors can do their best work. And that's the big thing about producing some of these films is working with some seasoned, some non-seasoned directors. And like our goal was to be the producers for our directors that maybe we didn't have in some scenarios. And so it's like,
that's massive.
It's like to really be there to support them and really not fight them. And, you know, it is about telling a good story, and it's about all those things.
I don't understand. You're producing and not trying to take 60% of the budget for yourself?
No, not at all.
Tell me more.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, like you said, to support them, because I think in the creative process, like I think sometimes we forget creatives, not necessarily that we're wired different. I think that's a little bit elitist, but like sometimes like how we work and how we have to set ourselves to a pace, if it gets disrupted by anger and getting yelled at and stuff like that, like you can completely destroy someone's creative process in that moment.
Right.
Because now, like I know that like I don't mind if someone comes up to me and is like, hey, this is not what we want you to tweet about. That's fine. Right. I can take any kind of criticism. But if you come scream at me, the next 2 days internally, I'm like, either one, like, I can't believe that just happened. This is the worst moment of my life.
Right.
Or 2, I hate you.
Right.
And like, I don't want to look at your project now. Right. And now I'm just going to do the bare minimum to get away. And not necessarily I would, but it's just like, that's what internally how I feel. Right.
That's human nature.
And like you being a director, you've had situations where you've been, yelled, I'm sure, yelled at by producers, stuff like that. And it just kills your vision for that project.
Right.
So it's really interesting you say that, because even in the post world, like, we love the collaboration. It's one of the things we love the most. It's fun to be part of this team and put this huge puzzle together.
Right.
But if a producer comes in and is just screaming at you and you don't understand why, or like you don't feel it's valid, it's like, I now this project, I don't have the passion for it. And like, that is what motivates us to be like, instead of just being like, well, we're going to build the Walla and this world, blah, blah, blah. Now we're like, we're going to build the Walla, but we're going to add something cool in here we thought about, because we really love this project. And like, when you're passionate about something, you're like, what else could I do for this?
Right.
And you
it's
push your
just
boundaries.
like hit a button and done.
Yeah.
Well, and I think for our brand in particular, what James and I are trying to do is create an environment for all artists to be able to do their best work, and to try to leave as much of the toxicity as possible at the door and keep it on the screen, the drama on the screen. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do because you're working with human beings. Yeah. But I think if you can filter decisions and conversations through that, I think you can keep a clearer head on how things kind of navigate this world. But I mean, the weird part we were talking about earlier is, I woke up one day at 19 and wanted to be a filmmaker, and I was a psychology major. And it was literally like, one day I was a psychology major, the next day I want to be a film director, and had no idea how it was going to happen. I was in Carrollton, Georgia, and then, cut to 20 years later plus, it's like, wow, I look around and we did it. Like, we have a career. Like, that was the thing. Like, we've been making movies for a really long time. And now I feel like we're really just starting to hit our stride, in that we've learned a lot of lessons and have let some things go that I think are gonna allow us to lift up other filmmakers, if that makes sense. Kind of like when we first started working together.
Oh no, definitely. I mean, you were one. Like, we talk about it still to this day. Like, I mean, you were instrumental when we were starting out to really helping us get our feet underneath us, and also having the encouragement to do it, because you don't always find that. There's people all the time, like they like, oh, what you're doing is awesome, but there's no like true encouragement. It's like, okay, cool, high five. And we got encouragement, and we hope one day that we can be that for somebody else too.
Right.
Even when we work with some of these younger guys with,
we still see that now too, where it's like, oh, you don't have a massive theater screening room, you're nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, encouragement is massive for us. We hope to like, we try and keep that positive atmosphere, especially in post, because
post can be really frustrating for a first time director, especially a writer director.
Oh yeah.
Because, it's
well, there's still egos.
Obviously there's egos involved, but it's almost like I think it's worse if you're a writer director, because I feel like it's a mirror of reality versus of what you think the art that you're making is. Because like you kind of went through it with Blind Night 10, you're like, oh wow, some of this stuff works, some of it doesn't. Mm-hmm. But you, being an experienced editor, were able to kind of divorce yourself from that. But not every director can. Like, when I was working with the director or the editor on Shifting Gears, like, he was telling me a story about, Donnie Darko and some things like that. And it's like, you get in the edit suite and it's like things aren't working, and you just have to kind of, you have to kind of come to terms with it and make the right decision to allow it to be fixed, or you kind of sink the ship. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference between like a so-called artist and a professional, and I think, and I don't think it's a right or wrong way, because I think there's benefit to both. But like, I know a lot of filmmakers that have made movies that have never seen the light of day because they can't let go of it.
Well, I mean, like we said earlier, I think it all boils back down to what helps tell the story. Right. If it doesn't help tell the story, let's cut it out.
You have to cut it. It's hard.
I always talk with people about that. Like, if there's something bumping them or bumping me, I'll say, I don't think this helps tell the story. I think we need to get rid of it.
Right.
And then we talk about it. And I think that's a fun, interesting process of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But some people don't know how to do that, because they're like, yeah, but it's a shot. And I love the shot.
Right. You're falling in love with the wrong thing. And I think you have to kind of be willing to let it go. And I think, especially for when I say young filmmakers, I don't necessarily mean age-wise. I mean like experience-wise. Green. Yeah, I think sometimes they want to go in and they're like, oh, everything works. It's really great. And it's like, okay, well, what's bumping you on this? Because it can't be. It's not perfect. Like nobody's perfect. It's like, how do you make it better?
Yeah.
And I think as long as you maintain that, then you can continue to kind of grow as a filmmaker. I think once you stop questioning, does it work? Then I think you kind of hit like a stagnation. Either you don't care anymore, or it's just kind of one of those things where, you're so hell-bent and want to just hang on to it, you're willing to go down with the ship. And you may be right. I mean, there's been plenty of directors that have like dug their heels in and it was the right call. But there's also been a bunch of them that have done that and it was the wrong call. So it's just, I mean, at that point, it's 50-50. Like, what bumped you on By Night's End that we cut?
We didn't shoot a lot. I mean, that script was 85 pages. So, I mean, there was
a couple.
There's one scene where we realized when we were cutting that it was a double beat. Like, we'd already explained this stuff, and now they're restating it. What can we do? So we cut the scene up and actually ADR'd it and made a completely new scene out of the footage. That was one thing that bumped and turned into something that worked better.
Well, that's a great example in a transition to like post, is being able to kind of step back and say, what are the tools I have to fix this? And double beats are so common when you're working fast or you're working in indie, because on the page you're reading it. And so the cognitive process of understanding it is sometimes a little different, because there's beats visually that can say the same thing that 5 sentences could say, right?
Yeah.
So we find ourselves in post all the time going, that's a double beat, that's a double. That's kind of like our first process, really. We get in together on the movies we've worked in. We're like, okay, here's the film. Let's go through and identify all the double beats. And then we start taking those out, and then it starts to kind of shape itself from there. But I think that's a great post analogy, is like, you're always going to have these double beats. And because of the way that I think the brain works.
Yeah,
in terms of having
sometimes you can find it in the script, but for that one, it was like tension happens in this scene. Well, this scene we realized was double beat. It's more tension that we need to build, like, this thing is coming, this presence, and then we realized, but how it was played out. Wait, it's not really that tense. They're just saying the same things over and over.
Right. We're getting this is like another argument. In real life, you have double beats every day.
Yeah, but absolutely.
And the good thing is like also knowing, like, the neat thing about that, and which can be done a lot of times, is we chopped up the scene, reused it.
Right.
I think we changed like 1 or 2 lines, not much, but like we still like kept some of the premise there. But in post, we sat back. Walker said, "Hey, we got to change this." After it was kind of addressed, and boom, we didn't lose that time that day.
Right.
But again, post is a big puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes like one thing you think is one way it's gonna go, it doesn't go that way. And a couple ADR lines, new scene.
Yeah.
And it moved the story forward and the information that we needed. It wasn't that we just did it just to keep the footage.
Right.
But we were like, this can help them.
We got to go from this location to the next location. They're right next to each other. We need to see them look at that location to get us to it. So how can we?
The intention was still there. We still needed it. So.
And I think, having done this for a long time now, I think being able to collaborate, it's not about being right or wrong, I think, on any side of the table. And I think that's something you have to constantly remind yourself of. Like, it's not about me being right and you being wrong, or you being right and I'm being wrong. It's about what's right for the story. Mm-hmm. And I think, if we look at this as a truly collaborative process, then, it's important for everybody to kind of, not everybody's going to be happy, especially if you're working in a group environment, but everybody's like, okay, well, that works for the story.
Yeah.
And then move on to the next thing.
I think that's part of maturity.
Right.
Because when you collaborate, like, definitely, if you have 2 opposing opinions, it's not going to go their direction.
Right.
But I think it's healthy. Walker writes a lot, and he'd be like, "What do you think?" And I'll get my notes back. This last week, I gave Walker notice that, "Hey, I think this is a problem," and he was
like, "Screw you, man!" And punched you in the face.
But he was just like, but he was just like, "I don't think it is." And I actually had to take a step back, and I was like, "Well, okay, maybe it's not." And then I actually came back and I said, "Actually,
here's another reason why."
It's not another reason, but here's a better way of why I explained to why I still see it as a problem." And Walker still has that. moving forward with that part of it. And it's like
I said, okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
It could be an issue in this way we're trying to tell the story. Let me figure it out.
But if he doesn't, if Walker decides at the end of the day, is like, I don't think it's a problem.
Or if I run out of time, we just shoot it.
I
haven't solved it.
But like, it's one of those things where like my ego's not hurting that. It's just like, as part of that team, it's just like, hey, here's something I saw, I see. And if we agree that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Okay, cool. Whatever.
And I think to go back to that toxicity comment, I think being able to have those kinds of conversations without toxicity and extreme emotions, I think ultimately gets you to a better answer, because like it would be one or the other. It's like somebody's going to be mad and somebody's going to leave, and then the problem still may not be solved. So it's just learning how to work in a group. And I think, and also creating an environment where people can come up and point things out like that. Like you're not afraid to say, hey, I don't think this works. And we've been in that situation a bunch of times. We've been in that situation where we like something and then the client doesn't like it and we've got to fix it. So it's like,
we've been in that situation with movies that, like with sound. We've had projects where it's been like, I've had to come to you, be like, hey, like, I understand y'all were in a fast-paced environment and a stress environment, and the location wasn't working out to your benefit at this point, but sound's not great.
Right. Sound's not great.
And it's like, I don't know how much I can clean it up. And but like, and there's been, I think I came to you one time, I was like, this just isn't going to work. And you were like, you have to make this work. This is where we're at. And like, I remember being like very frustrated about the situation, but like at the end of the day, we were able to clean it up and make it work.
Right.
But and you weren't just like, you didn't go off anything like that. But I mean, it's just like, it's that collaboration. But again, on that one, I kind of had to step back on that, because I was like, hey, this doesn't work. And like, part of me wants to be like, give me clean audio, because I'm not going to spend all this time.
Right.
But you're like, this is where we are and we have to do it.
This is it.
This is it. And it's just like, we don't have the budget to ADR all, an entire like couple scenes.
Right.
This is what you got, dude.
And it worked. And it passed QC.
Yeah, and it passed QC. And like nobody else will ever know that conversation happened.
Right.
But even in post, like us as posts, I mean, we talk about this all the time. Like, some people in post want to be like, well, now I am the sound guy, I'm the colorist, and you follow my vision. No.
Right.
We're following the directors and the producers and whoever. Yeah, we're following those, but above us, their vision. So like we, sometimes in post you have to learn to kind of let your ego go.
For sure.
And like, and sometimes like I can't blame the sound guy, because like I don't know what he was under at that moment.
Right.
And if you're out in the city, like, man, anybody can. That's one of the hardest fights there is.
The last movie we did, one of the locations was right next to a train track, and we were looking at it.
Oh, you're talking about the one?
Yeah, we were looking at the director. It was James and I and the director, Courtney Miller.
Oh, that one.
And we were looking at it, and I was like, well, you can't really hear it too bad. Like, this is a location scout, and like, finding locations is tricky, man. It's hard. And so it worked aesthetically for a couple of reasons, and that was kind of a downer. And there was like a train maybe like every couple of hours. Lo and behold, on day we shoot, it's busy train track day. Like just moving shit constantly. It was like, well, that might be ADR. but the sound guy I was talking to, I go, how is it? And he's like, well,
it's a train.
It's not terrible. Yeah. And then it's a train. That's the big thing, is like just making sure that it's identifiable. And as long as it's layered, then you're able to fix it. But like when you're moving as fast as you're moving, and we're constantly moving fast. I mean, that's the thing about making these films at these budgets, is it's fast. It's like extreme filmmaking. And I like it because it feels extreme in that sense. Like you have to kind of stay in the zone. You can't really drift. So I like all the all encompassing things, but you have to watch those little details, because they will come back and bite you. And sometimes you can't do anything. You need lights to make.
I would love to experience shooting like 2 scenes in one day, 1 scene in one day, just to see what it's like.
Do you know what's funny? You and I've had this conversation. Every director I talk to, we kind of talk about it. I don't know at this point in my career I would know what to do.
Yeah. Okay, slower.
We just did.
Okay, now faster.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Like if I don't have 5 pages in the can by lunch, I'm nervous. It's like you have 2 days. I will say, stunts, having time to shoot action. That's the tricky part, because action takes time.
Forever.
And in these budgets, from a scheduling standpoint, I think it's important to isolate those. And for a long time, James and I work very closely with our AD team to like schedule out the movies we do. But for a long time, when both of us were working as, DPs and directors, other people would hand us a schedule and it's like, here's 8 pages plus a huge fight scene. And you're like, there should be a better way to do this because the fight scene's ultimately not going to be what you want it to be because you're not going to have the time.
That's the thing that bumped me in Barrington. I've been thinking about this whole time.
Yeah.
The fight in the crawl space, because we did that and the oneer in one day.
That was it.
So it was like, well, I guess we got the fight. We need to do the oneer. And then we go to do the oneer and then we cut it together. I was like, fight's pretty lame. Wish we'd done something more there. Oh.
It still works though. I mean, how many fights have you seen in crawl space?
Yeah.
The movie's good. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the movie.
Yeah, but you're talking about stunts. We're working on a stunt thing or a script that has a lot of car stunts in it, and we're like, how are we gonna do this in 3 days?
Yeah. That's the tricky part. Are y'all making that?
Yeah. Did I show you that short script?
You told me about it when we were working together.
We're working on it right now.
Nice. I want to see it. That'll be fun. I mean, I think that's the big thing is just, plan. Yeah. Trust your team, work with people that you enjoy working with.
That's massive.
That's really it. And if you're lucky, 20 years goes by and you found yourself, you had some kind of a career.
And you found some kind of happiness.
Yeah, have more good days. Have more good days than bad. These are all the mantras that we sit and post.
So what's next? More producing?
Right now, focusing on the movie that we just did that we produced and I directed is coming out, I think, in June, which we'll be able to talk more about it when it's closer to coming out. And then, I'm focusing on producing.
Sweet.
Yeah. And James and I are just really wanting to work with new directors and help do that. And I think my next project as a director, I'm attached to, a horror film, but that's been going on for a while. And
pre-production hell, right?
Yeah. Turnaround stand, the whole deal. But it's like, I love making movies and I love working with filmmakers and I love working with the artists and I love all the different aspects of making movies because it's so all encompassing to like all these different art forms. So yes, I'm very happy as a filmmaker and I get to do this every day. But I think if anybody's out there with a creature feature script.
How do you feel like a live action Care Bears?
Sure.
Yeah.
With guns?
With guns. And we'll call it a creature feature because the Care Bears have they don't care anymore.
And then Cocaine Bears coming out. I want to bring back the creature feature as a producer and a director. I just think I might differ than a lot of people. I just like watching movies. And so I like to have different experiences. And sometimes it's almost like punk rock, like it's played bad on purpose because it's good.
Yeah.
Or lean into.
Dude, you and Evan need to talk more. Everything you're saying is Evan. Writer Evan is who I'm talking about.
Well, yeah.
Anyways.
But yeah,
we're getting into offline conversations.
Yeah. I don't know how to wrap it up.
Yeah. Walker, you're pretty good at wrapping
the end.
Up.
Cut.
Yeah.
So Rift is out and about in the world, right? We can watch that places. All these other movies, people can follow you to find out about.
And a lot of them are going to start dropping on Tubi in the spring. You can follow us on Instagram, Subtle Films, and you can follow Wild Winn Pictures on Instagram, Wild Winn Pictures.
And everyone can go into your DMs and pitch you everything for Tubi.
Whatever they want.
Okay.
And then you can follow me, Jason Winn Director, Instagram, and James Settle on Instagram.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, until the next one.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else we need to say.
Cut.
Yeah.
Southern Fried Post is produced by Sean McCain and me, Walker Whited. Music and incidentals by Tyler Kitchens. All recordings done in studio at W Squared Media. Follow us on Instagram at W Squared Media for more information on new episodes. Thanks for listening.